All right.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Diamonds 2020. Right now, I have with me Kara Swanson. She is the awesome author of The Girl Who Could See and also of Dust, which she had the cover reveal for that a few days ago. So,
Yeah, that
hi
was exciting.
Kara, I'm so glad to have you
Hi,
here.
Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I'm excited to hear your message.
All right. Thank you. All right. Hello there, friends. My name is Kara Swanson, and it is my immense honor to get to join you all for the Diamonds 2020 conference today. Thank you so much again, Sarah, for having me. I really, really appreciate it. So before I dive in, I just wanted to give you all a heads up that I will probably be doing a bit of a spontaneous Q&A at the end of my session. So if you have any questions while I'm chatting or at the end, feel free to go ahead and pop them in the chat. And if we have time at the end, I will go ahead and make sure that I can answer all of those. So yeah, it should be exciting. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. So today I'm going to be talking about finding your community in unlikely places. Community. It's a word that I think you'll hear tossed around a lot. But do we truly understand what it means? What the purpose of it is? I think at its core, our need for community comes from the same need we have for relationship with God. That same need that fellow believers have to depend on one another. We were created not only to walk through life alone, but to have others to lean on, to share with, and to grow together, to experience the ups and downs of life together. We need other people to remind us of truth when we lose sight of it, and to lift us when we are weary and weak. I think oftentimes, however, in looking for that supportive community, we tend to sometimes look for community within the places of people that understand our experiences. But I've found that sometimes the best community can be found in the most unlikely of places and with those who may have never experienced what we have, but can still connect with us on a deeper way. Now, before I dive into the bulk of this session, I briefly want to say too that I realize everyone listening to this will come from different seasons. I know that we will all have different walks of life, different illnesses, different symptoms, and I would never claim to have a one size fits all answer for this, or to be able to give input specifically to your unique situation, since I simply don't know where each of you are at. But I do know that you are brave, and I know that your heart and your journey is beautiful, and that you deserve to belong just as much as anyone else. And if a glimpse into my chronic illness journey and the things that I have experienced can encourage you and maybe make you feel a little bit less alone and maybe give you some tools to find community yourself, then I would be ever so grateful for that. But I also want to humbly come to this conversation, understanding that there are so many different experiences when it comes to finding community and struggling with chronic illness. And so I want to be really gracious in speaking into this situation and just clarifying that, yeah, that my situation is going to look a little bit different. But at the same time, I think that I can connect with a lot of this because I know what it's like. I know what it's like to feel alone, to feel forgotten, and to feel unheard. And so I hope that I can speak into that if that's where you are at right now. And I think most important, I want to remind us that there is a God who hears us, that you are not forgotten, that whether or not anything I say in this talk is truly helpful, I know that we have a God who lives inside of us and he works for our good. And I know that he will bring community, he will bring belonging, and he will bring people into your life to support you in his own way and his own timing. So that's my prayer for you. That our God, who sees into our brokenness, will continue to open doors and draw you closer into community with him and community with others. All right, so with that said, let's just continue on and we'll dive a little bit into my own personal journey. So, as I said, my name is Kara Swanson. I was raised in the jungles of Papua New Guinea, which is an island above Australia. I'm the daughter of missionaries, so I'm a missionary kid. Being an MK meant that I moved often. I was very used to constantly shuffling from one place to the next. I was very used to making friends and then leaving them. I spent a lot of my childhood interacting with other MKs, those who probably should have understood my experiences the most that anyone else could. But those times when I was interacting with other MKs, a lot of times during my childhood, those are the times when I felt most alone, when I was surrounded by the people that should have understood and should have resonated. But a lot of times I just felt very disconnected. It wasn't actually until I came back to the US that I began to find a community. I was diagnosed with Lyme disease when I was in my senior year, so about 17, 18. I had already had Lyme for several years up to that point. I've had it since I was 15. I am now 23. um, I was practically bedridden my senior year of high school, and went on and off, have had lots of seasons of just intense fatigue and different symptoms, lots of different elements of pain, and yeah, Lyme-induced arthritis, all those kinds of things for years now. And it was during that time in my senior year when I was practically bedridden that I began to write. And I think that writing in so many ways is a gift from God. I know there are a lot of people who, whether that be from having brain fog or whatever the situation is, they wouldn't even be able to write. And I know that I just think it was a little bit of a miracle, maybe, that God gave me, something within His strength that I was able to do. And writing allowed me to feel like I was able to take a lot of my experiences and translate them in some way. It gave me something to feel a little bit more connected, and like I was making headway even in like one small area. And through writing and through diving into the written word, that is how I began to connect with other authors online. um, some of those online friendships, those people that I met online while I was, like I said, practically bedridden, have become some of my very dearest friends. I also began to connect with other people in my local area in church. These authors online, these local friends, these people that I was connecting with, they had never had Lyme disease. They had never been missionary kids. They couldn't understand a lot of my frame of reference, and yet somehow these were the people that made me feel seen. These were the people who dug into my life and who asked really good questions. And so I began to wonder, like, why is it that these people connect and other ones that I would have assumed would have understood? Why was there a disconnect there with them? Um, and why was it that I found my own community when I stepped outside of my own frame of reference? And I think one of the big reasons is because I found people who chose to get to know me, not people that we were just simply thrown together in a situation. And it was these people who chose to get to know me that understood the heart of my hardship, even if they didn't understand the hardship itself. So that brings me to basically my first point today. Find people who will relate with the heart of your battle, even if they cannot relate with the battle itself. And I'm going to say that again if you're taking notes. But first off is find people who relate with the heart of your battle, even if they cannot relate to the battle itself. I really love what Galatians 6:2 says. It says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. That's NIV. I think that carrying each other's burdens is just so very important. But I think oftentimes we can carry each other's burdens without necessarily needing to understand the exact physical burden. I think we can understand the heart of the burden and be able to carry each other's hearts in this. And honestly, for me, that is more valuable, to have someone caring for my heart rather than only worrying about my physical care. The physical care is important too, for certain. But I think that if my heart is cared for and well supported, I can handle the physical illness even better. I may feel wonderful. I might feel fine physically, but if my heart is heavy or I feel like no one cares for my emotional health in any way, then I'm going to still be a mess. And so even if I am not feeling as well, to have somebody who cares about my heart and cares to listen to that is really important and will help me just to continue to grow and heal anyway. But it's so important. Um, so another example of this would be finding grace and support in the writing community. This has been such a boon to me. I do have friends outside of the writing community, for certain, such precious friends. But I think the writing community kind of caught me off guard. And I think there are a handful of reasons why these people make me feel especially cared for. And this can really apply to any type of friendship in any type of field. And I think too, some of this has to do with life stage. I think especially as we continue on, and as you get older and you begin to connect with people that are a little bit older, some of those dynamics that you might have had in high school or junior high, they shift for sure. But I think that there are just some really amazing things that I've had people within this specific community reach out to me in, that other people have as well. But I think these things will be just, yeah, they're good examples for any kind of friendship. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of list a couple different things. So first off, I found that these people initiate. They choose to pursue friendship even virtually. And that was one of the things that was kind of amazing to me. And I think especially when you have writers who, love to write and talk and type things out, I think that you have people who generally tend to be pretty good with their words. And so even online, they're pursuing friendships, they're asking questions, they're searching you out. But I think that applies across the board. Finding someone who is willing to initiate, where you don't feel like you're the only one who's constantly giving, where they're giving back at the same time, is so important. Secondly, They ask heart questions. They want to know the deeper parts of my experiences. They take the time to ask those deep heart questions. They're not satisfied with just having surfacey conversations and surfacey friendships. They want to go deeper than that. And so I think that's another really important thing. They initiate. They ask heart questions. They also embrace my dreams. And I feel like this one seems a little cliche, maybe, or but I think especially when you're pursuing something um, different or unusual, or when you are dealing with a chronic illness and your dreams are going to look extremely different in some ways than somebody else's, or your abilities or your limitations. And so finding someone who not only initiates, not only asks those hard questions, but also values and embraces your dreams and sees these things that you care about and that you value as having value as well. I think that is so important because it continues to encourage you, and it helps to make those small victories that you pursue to feel equally as important, because they are important. Your dreams are important, even if you may not be able to reach them in the same way that other people might. They are still very important. Another aspect of what these friends do for me is they challenge my viewpoint. These are friends who help me grow in so many ways by graciously challenging the way that I view the world. I think it's so valuable to have people who, with grace, are willing to say, hey, have you thought about something this way? Hey, your attitude today, you need to reconsider how you're treating people in this way. Who are willing to challenge my view, as far as sanctification goes and me growing as a person and spiritually, but also challenge my view to help me grow in the way that I see the world, the way that I translate things, the way that I understand this or that. I think that having people who are willing to kind of have that see iron sharpens iron dynamic, those kinds of people is so important, and so helpful. Another aspect that I think, especially having a chronic illness, that's important is they do not undervalue me because of my limitations. And I feel like we're all probably saying amen a little bit, but um, I know for me, a lot of times I can undervalue myself because of my own limitations, and I can be probably harder on myself in some ways than other people can be on me. And so people who, if they have to drive me somewhere, go home early, remind me of things I forget because brain fog, or just sit with me, or even realize that I'm not going to be able to do anything for a whole week. Um, they don't make me feel like a burden, but they make me feel valued, and they understand that, and they sit in that with me instead of making me feel undervalued or lesser because of my limitations. And if you can find people like that, that is amazing because they are basically reminding you of the things that you're forgetting yourself. Yeah, friends who are willing to see more of you than you see of yourself. I think that is so incredibly important. Um, the last thing that I would say is that they encourage me spiritually. They help to fill my soul and remind me of God's truth. And that one's pretty simple, but I think it's so important. So if you're taking notes, I'll run through these really quickly. They initiate, they ask heart questions, they embrace my dreams, they challenge my viewpoint, they don't undervalue me because of my limitations, and they encourage me spiritually. And these are just a few things. I'm sure there are so many more. And I'm sure if you sat down and you came up with a list of these are the kinds of people that are life giving and refill my heart and just encourage me and propel me forward, you'd come up with probably similar things and probably many more. But these are just a couple of the main ones. And there are certainly other people in my life who interact with me in this way, especially friends at church, that do a really good job of doing this, or family members, or wherever it is, wherever your community is. But again, just using the writing community as an example here. So yeah, that brings us along to our second point, which is find supportive people who will not only lift you when you are weak and hold you fast, but remind you of the world outside your limitations and illness. And I'll repeat that again. The second point is find supportive people who will not only lift you when you are weak and hold you fast, but also remind you of the world outside your limitations and your illness. It is so, so important for us to have people in our lives who not only help us through the hard moments, but also remind us that our illness does not define us, that there is beauty and passion and ministry and soul beyond the pain. We so desperately need that kind of supportive community, or we'll become very locked in our own heads and our world starts to shrink. I find those kinds of people also grow my faith and are such needed reminders that I serve a God who is much bigger than my limitations. I like to think of it this way. I like to think a lot of times when I have a chronic illness or when I'm going through a period of depression or anxiety or anything like that, I feel like my world begins to feel very small and dark. It's almost like my world becomes a night, right? But when I have people that can see past my limitations, past my experience, past wherever my heart is and my mind is currently, I feel like they crack the sky. It's like they make this fissure of light that begins to shine through, and all of a sudden I can see past, whatever it is that I'm dealing with, to be able to see outside of my own limitations. And so I think it's really important for you to have people like that, people who crack the sky for you, people who remind you there is light yet, even if you feel like you can't see it right now. So that is another huge one. People that will remind you of the world outside your limitations and your illness. So another example of this is writers' conferences, or going to the movies with friends, or people who are willing to drive me, give me the freedom to rest when I'm doing things, frequently checking in to see how I am, never making me feel like a burden. Especially at a long event like a writers' conference, I have been so blessed to have community and have people. I'll go to an event, and I'll have to take a lot of breaks and lots of rest. But I'll have people who frequently walk up and just check in on me, make sure I'm feeling okay. They're willing to let me just sit in, such and such chair. They're going to make sure I get from point A to point B. They're going to make sure that if I look like I'm zoning out a little bit, that I'm not going to pass out. And so, I don't know your limitations. I don't know what you're able to do, what you're not. But having people who are willing to remind you of things beyond that, but also care for you within that context, is really, really important. Um, I love that I can have a community and I can have people that will check in on me, but they also value my opinion, and they respect what I have to offer as a human, as an author, as a young woman who is growing and learning from God every day. They care for my needs, but they also remind me of my own value. I'm so grateful for people from my church, my town, my family, my writing community that see me as more than just my illness, more than the extent of things that I can't do. And through them, I can begin to see myself this way too. They see the perspective that I have and the strength that I have that it's taken me to survive this long. And by them seeing that and them seeing the value that I have to offer, again, it reminds me of the things that I can sometimes forget myself, which is just, yeah, so important and so, so helpful. All right. So my third point, after finding supportive people who will not only lift you when you are weak and hold you fast, but also remind you of the world outside your limitations and illness, who have that balance. My third point is find people who are life giving while not expecting you to give more in return than you can. And I will repeat that one again for you guys. Find people who are life giving while also not expecting you to give more in return than you can. So life-giving people truly are just those who love well. As it says in 1 Peter 4:8, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Finding people who love selflessly and deeply can kind of bridge that gap between your experiences and maybe them not understanding that as much. It's them finding the heart of your experiences, them finding the heart of your burdens and your whatever your hardship is. Um, when we love selflessly, um, when you find people who love selflessly, when you're around them, suddenly it feels like they've given you a boost of strength. They lift your heart and your soul. They don't see you as a burden, but they instead pour into you in an effortless, selfless way. It's these people who they look at you not as something they can get out of you, but they look at you with value and they care. And they're willing to kind of step into your world. They're willing to step into your frame of reference and understand that. So as another example, as an extrovert, I found that there are some people who actually give me extra energy when I'm around them, and others who just drain me. As I began to realize this, it helped me to better identify the types of friends and influences that I was letting into my life. I've been able to search out the types of people that are life giving and those who may not be as sympathetic to my situation or simply have far higher expectations than I can meet. I've learned to have the grace to step back from them if I need. And in the same way, as I've looked for people who give life to me, I hope to give life to others, to be someone who can care, whose care and kindness and determination is able to spark hope in others. So when it comes to life giving people, yeah, it's people who are selfless, and those who are willing to just be a good friend in a lot of ways. Those who do not go into a friendship with all these expectations, but go into a friendship on very even playing field, and are willing to, who are willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that you're comfortable. Not in a way that is, selfish or you're making them necessarily do things for you, but in a way that to them that's not a burden, that you may have to function a little bit differently. To them, that's just normal. And they see enough value in you and they care about you enough that none of it matters. I think it's when people see someone with an illness and the various aspects that you may need to help them, whether that be, just the practical side, maybe that's even like physical, carrying you around, or giving you rides places, or realizing that you don't have the same amount of energy, or helping with, medication, or whatever that is. People who see that as an extra thing, whether or not they even realize they're doing it, a lot of times when you have people that make it noticeable that they are, um, I guess, devoting themselves in an extra way to help you, it begins to make you feel like a burden, because it's something that they're pointing out a lot of times. And so people who oftentimes just do it because they care, it doesn't matter as much to them. And even when you mention it and you thank them and they're like, well, yeah, what else was I going to do? It's those kinds of people I think that can be life giving. And there's definitely a spectrum, and not to say, especially if you're talking about some rather sizable needs that people are helping and covering. Yes, you want them to be able to communicate and feel free to communicate their needs and communicate when they're helping. But I think people who just kind of slide right in and are willing to step right into your world and see the value there and the beauty there, I think those people truly can be encouraging to your heart as well. All right. So, in conclusion, a lot of the dynamic of finding your community and your people in unlikely places is being willing to search out community, but also find kindred spirits that are willing to usher you in. I think this needs to go both ways. I think that we have to not only search out people that are life giving, but also willing to be life giving ourselves. I think we need to, I think sometimes, as we can get locked in our own heads and our own experiences, it can be harder to slow down and to look around and to find ways to pour back into someone, especially when your limitations might make that pouring back harder in some ways. But I think that if we can have that sort of selfless perspective ourselves, and if we can pour back into people ourselves, we'll find that the kind of people that we want to be friends with, kind of people that we want to engage with, they'll come to us, in some ways, because we're being the kind of friend that we want to have. Um, and I would say too, keep your eyes open, friends. Don't be afraid to step toward a friendship, even one that may seem unlikely, if you feel God is prompting you. We never quite know what someone else has gone through, or the ways that we may be used to support them, or God may be drawing them into our lives to support us. Pray for wisdom and for the right people to come along. And again, I feel like one of the biggest things for me has been realizing that God can bring community anywhere. He can bring community into any situation. And sometimes, yeah, sometimes it's a place where you don't expect it. It's something that you don't anticipate, and yet He just brings it there. And so, like I said, being someone who is a good friend themselves, being a good friend yourself, you'll find a lot of those people connecting with you just simply because they're kindred spirits and like-minded. I would pray especially for godly people who genuinely care for you and will be willing to work with your limitations, but also encourage you to keep looking to the sky, the world beyond our pain and our hurting. And people who will also remind you to look to the God who can bring joy in pain and hope even in hopeless times. Look for community that will loop an arm around you and pull you to your feet when you feel too weak to stand. They're out there, and sometimes you just have to start by being the first one to look around. You may need to search those people out a bit, but when you find them, they will be the ones to search for you back. They will be the ones who are willing to be honest and vulnerable and connect with the heart of what you are going through. And together you can both rise. You may just need to find the right kind of person. Um, you may just find the right kind of person is in the place you would last expect, but that they are praying for community too. So I would just wrap up with that thought is I think, um, we need to keep our eyes open. We need to be looking around for just the people and the places that God has put us. But at the same time, as you search out community, very likely somebody else is searching for you back and they just don't realize it yet. And so being willing to be gracious and, yeah, being willing to have that open heart for sure. All right. So I wrapped up a little bit early, which means that if you guys have any questions, I'm going to give it a little bit of time and I can answer if you want to go ahead and ask in the chat. Thanks for all your comments so far, guys. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. Sarah asks, any tips on how to find those kinds of people? Um, as far as like just the practical side, um, I find a lot of times people who are servant hearted end up being good friends. And so, sometimes people will be more quiet and not have as easy of a time communicating some of those things. So I would say even look around for the people who are helping out or engaging in their community or engaging in ministry without being asked, or the people who, yeah, just quietly serving. Um, because those are the people who are used to looking around for needs without having to be asked and just like jumping right in. And they may not be used to people searching them out. I think another thing is that with our culture, um, we tend to not be very good at searching each other out. We're not very good at fostering friendships. We're not very good at being the first person to initiate in something. And so I think it can be really important to be able to look around and see if there are people who look like they would be good friends, and be willing to initiate if you need to. But also putting yourself in the position. Again, everyone's going to have different degrees of limitations and what they can do, what they can't. But even engaging in your local, if there's a Bible study going on locally, or whatever it is that you're interested in, a local chess club, or I don't know, can any of us play chess with brain fog? Probably not. But whatever it is that you are interested in. Um, all right, Julie asks, any tips for initiating when you feel like you have a burden? Hate to invite someone to coffee when they have to drive, deal with your wheelchair, etc. Yeah, I understand this for sure. I don't have a wheelchair, and I still, um, yeah, losing chess with brain fog. Um, yeah, I don't have a wheelchair, and I still have to have people drive me to coffee oftentimes. Um, it is tricky. I think sometimes it's just being willing to be honest and put it out there, because oftentimes when you let someone know, hey, I'm not able to drive, but I would love to get together. And maybe what that even looks like is you say, hey, if you drive, I'll buy your coffee, something like that. But I think once people understand, a lot of it's communicating your needs. Once people understand, especially with the situation like a wheelchair, they're going to probably be very sympathetic and understand, yeah, why you're unable to drive in that current situation. And yeah, being able to take you. I rarely have people that seem like they're put out by having to drive me places. I tend to over apologize, and they're always like, "It's fine, Kara." Um, yeah, so I think it's just being able to communicate, and put a little bit of trust out there. God will guide you to the right person. And I mean, if you go once and they seem really put out by it and it's, uncomfortable, then maybe that's your indication that that person isn't quite the right fit. But you never will know until you try. Um, yeah, and some people love to drive, and it's not a big deal at all. So yes. Oh, Sarah wants to know about my books. Thank you for asking. So yeah, I have a novella called The Girl Who Could See. I wish I had a copy on me close by next time. But I have a novella called The Girl Who Could See. And so a novella is basically a little bit shorter than a full length fiction novel. The Girl Who Could See is about 200 pages. Most novels are closer to 400. So it's like half the size of a full length novel. And I wrote The Girl Who Could See when I was dealing with Lyme during like right after my senior year, when I realized college wasn't going to be an option. And I actually published that book myself when I was 21. And it has done fairly well for itself and has opened, just God has been so gracious to allow it to open some really amazing doors. Um, and yeah, I actually wrote that book as a way to translate a lot of my feelings, from being a missionary kid who kind of felt like she was stuck between two or three different worlds and could see them in a way no one else could. And also being someone who has a chronic illness and also felt like I had a unique perspective. And the main character in that book actually cannot drive because she sees things that nobody else can see. So she tends to like swerve around things that aren't actually popping out of the ground. And so it was fun to add in little things like that, the driving thing especially, because I could certainly relate with that, even though I can't see, you know, imaginary friends that are real or anything like that. And then Dust is a Peter Pan retelling slash sequel that is releasing in July, and is about Peter Pan. It's about two characters. One of them, the main female character, Claire, in a lot of ways represented just some of the emotions that I was working through. She is a 19-year-old living in California whose brother disappeared when they were 14. She's a twin. And a lot of the book has to do with her coming to grips with just the uniqueness of who she is. She's part pixie, spoilers, and so she has pixie dust, but her pixie dust actually reflects her emotions. And so I promise this will actually tie back in. But when she's upset or frustrated, oh, thank you, Anne. When she's upset or frustrated, her pixie dust actually starts to burn and hurt. And when she is happy and cheerful, her pixie dust allows things to fly. And so a lot of it was working through how my own emotions could affect people around me and could tank my health. And how, in situations when things felt dark and dreary, learning to find hope and learning to find just beauty. When I wrote the first draft of Dust, I was dealing with a really severe stint of depression. Um, like to the point that I remember telling my friend, I don't know how to write about Peter Pan because I don't remember what true joy feels like. Like I know, I can kind of remember happiness, but I was telling her I don't know joy. I don't know how to write this carefree character because I don't know what that feels like. And so through working through a lot of those emotions, it allowed me to channel just a lot of different things. Um, Peter has to, a lot of his journey is him understanding what growing up means and taking responsibility. Um, but with Claire's arc, a lot of it had to do with working through mental health and emotional things and just coming to grips with the fact that regardless of how you feel and regardless of what other people have told you, that you have value because you are, you are created and you matter. And for me, we have value because we're children of God. And for Claire, a lot of times that was translated fictionally into this idea that she was created for another world. She was created for something more than Earth and this world and these things that felt overwhelming. And so her finding, I guess, hope in the sense that her identity isn't rooted in her and necessarily what she's done or, yeah, what she feels like she has to give to the world. But her identity is rooted in the fact that she has value. She was created for something more, and that is intrinsic. It can't be changed. So, yeah, yeah. Definitely a lot, I think, too. I can understand what you mean, Julie. She's saying that with people lifting in and out of cars, helping her in and out, those kinds of things, it can be a lot to ask of a new friend. But I would just, yeah, you could even start small. And maybe what it looks like is you're willing to meet in the middle somewhere. Or if you can have her over to your house, something like that, maybe finding a middle ground. But at the same time, if someone seems like they're genuinely interested in pursuing a friendship, um, I think that they would be willing to, yeah, to step into that, even if it's different. Well, I'm so glad, Bethany. She says that she enjoyed the girl who could see, and it was encouraging for her as she dealt with her illness. Yeah, pretty cool. All right, guys, got any other questions for me? I think some of this is because you probably haven't noticed, but I tend to talk a little bit quickly, so tend to get through my content faster than I expect. Yeah, and since we opened up the conversation about books, you guys can really ask me anything, since this is a spontaneous Q&A. Hmm. Yeah, Sophie is talking about having gotten the mobility scooter. That's amazing. Regular game night. Game nights are the best. Hmm. How has reading and writing helped me process illness? Thank you, Sarah. Um, a lot of different things. I think that having something to do that was less physical and more mental really helped me to have something to keep my mind off of how I was feeling. Um, in a lot of ways, writing for me is a way to process. It has allowed me to work through the feelings and emotions that I was going through. I think it allowed me to face the fact that I couldn't do as much as I wanted. You know, I think a lot of times, at least for me, I feel like when you're dealing with illness, it kind of feels like your life gets put on pause. And a lot of the goals you might have made beforehand, a lot of the things that you might have expected to be able to do, all of a sudden you just can't. And so I think writing and reading allowed me to like in an odd way experience things just differently. It was a lot internally to be able to research things and yeah, have I guess journeys without actually having to leave my room. I think it allowed me to open my world, and not just through writing fiction and that process, but also it has allowed me to make so many connections and has given me a platform to say something, even if I can't always specifically leave my house. I think that has been one of the biggest things, is just finding something that I could do that allowed me to feel like I was making progress somewhere, but also gave me a platform to be able to engage more with people outside of my own sort of bubble, I guess. Um, yeah, and I think too, it has been really interesting to work through, um, I guess, incorporating a lot of the emotions behind my illness into my writing in different ways. I think that I've been able to write a much wider variety and depth of feeling into my stories, and just be able to communicate those things in a unique way that I wouldn't have been able to if I hadn't experienced a lot of what I have through being sick, if that makes sense. So I think it has helped in certainly a lot of ways like that, and just coming to grips with just realizing that God puts us all in different positions in different places, and sometimes, yeah, sometimes He slows us down, and sometimes He puts us in the position of just trusting Him. With every day and with every instance of our lives, and with the choices that we make, and um, yeah, those kinds of things, and learning to trust that those times when our lives might feel paused, that He is still working and doing things even in that, if that makes sense. That He is not idle, even if we may feel like um, life has been slowed, if that makes sense. Yeah. Oh, how can you pray for me? Thank you, Sarah. Um, let's see. Well, I feel like when people ask me this question, like the past couple weeks, it was always, well, I'm teaching for this really cool online conference for chronically ill people, and I want to do a good job. But I'm here, so thank you. I would say, yeah, just for wisdom, I actually am doing better. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm beginning to get some of my energy levels back, which is crazy. And it's a lot of emotions. It's odd to have spent so much of your life um, being cautious about how much energy you expel here or there, and then suddenly kind of waking up and realizing that, yeah, you can do more. And so, just I think wisdom in keeping up with my current treatments for Lyme, and just regardless of whether I keep improving or if I end up, you never know. Sometimes you can slide backward, but just um, grace in that for sure. Um, and then just, yeah, wisdom in different things moving forward. With my book coming out, I have a lot of just different things that I really want to be able to do, but the wisdom of whether or not I should do them all. Don't want to push myself too hard. Um, yeah. Julie Cranford asks, do I struggle with brain fog to read? And the answer is yes. Like I said, I am actually doing much better. So I do not deal with brain fog nearly as much as I used to. Mainly, it has been memory lately. I don't know if you guys, okay, you probably do, if you guys can relate to this, but my memory can just be totally terrible. I want to say total trash, but that doesn't seem very kind of my memory, but it can be really, really bad. And so there will just be things that I knew that I read that I forgot. Um, I Yeah, so I'm a meticulous planner because I forget everything. So I have like 3 to-do lists that I constantly check to make sure I keep up. There will be times I have a hard time reading unless it's my own book because I tend to just have it not it's harder for me to focus. So I do audiobooks and that kind of thing, but it feels like a lot of times my brain can handle so much, but then there's just no more. And so if I'm writing, I oftentimes have a hard time reading. When I'm working on my own project, it's a lot of repetition. I'll outline something and then I'll write a first draft and then I'll go over it again and again and again. And so even if I have brain fog, I can go at my own pace and go slowly. And I'm basically just reading over the project multiple times. And if things jump out at me, then I will tweak them and change them and fix them. And so it feels like a different process in a lot of ways. But yes. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, I don't want to cut you off if you're
No,
still
you're good.
okay.
I'm
Well,
good.
thank you so much for that
Yeah.
amazing message. It was really good. It was really encouraging to me. So we're gonna quick. I totally forgot because guys, I've got a lot of brain fog. I totally forgot to do the giveaway at the end of Christy's session. So we have 2 giveaways right now, one for Kara's session and one for Christy's session. So the winner of Christy's giveaway prize, which is which is a copy of Embracing Worth provided by Chronic Joy Ministries,
Mm,
is Anna Pustai. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but congratulations, Anna. We will email you
congrats,
about
Anna.
your giveaway prize. And the winner of The Girl Who Could See, provided by Kara Swanson, is Michelle Teason. Again, I don't know if I said that right, but congrats, Michelle.
Congrats, Michelle. Jinx, you owe me a soda. Just kidding. That's bad for you. You
Okay,
can owe me water. Anyway, yeah.
chronic illness problems. So, yes, so thank you both all for coming. If you go ahead and click on the link down below in the description of this video, we'll go on to the next session by Pamela Paquette, and she is sharing about our stories and how powerful they are. So go ahead and click over there, and we'll see you in a minute.
Sounds good.